All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for the first event in our Meet the Artist series in celebration of my new book, The Art of You. And I'm really excited for today's conversation. The book that you all pre-ordered, and thank you so much for ordering the book. But this book really offers it's a guidebook for the full spectrum of the creative process from beginning to end. And I'm just fascinated by that process of creativity and how it all comes together. It's to me, it's such a magical and even a spiritual process. There being, at the beginning of the creative process, there is literally nothing. And then an idea pops into your head. And then we are able to nurture these ideas into reality. And it really is, for me, the art of making the unreal real. And for me, such a critical part of that process is learning to listen to and trust the intuition. So, we're going to talk today about intuition, channeling the creative muse, and really how to create a ritual around your own creative practice, whatever that might look like. So I'm going to start off by reading a short section from the book. And then I'm going to invite Lalah to the stage and we're going to have a Q&A with her. And then we'll save some time at the end for some Q&A. So I'm going to start things off by reading a section that is in the chapter about intuition. So there's a chapter in the book called Cultivating Intuition. And of all the chapters in the book, I feel like learning to cultivate your intuition is, if not the most important part of the creative process, certainly one of the most important parts. So this section is called Where Do Ideas Come From? Where do ideas come from? The truth is, nobody knows the answer. One second, there is no idea. Then one suddenly appears, like a light bulb turning on. It often feels like the process of idea generation happens outside our conscious control. It's not something we are doing, it's something that happens to us, through us. The original meaning of the word inspiration is to be guided by divine influence. The words spirit and inspiration can be traced back to the same Latin root, spire, which means breath. Any act of creativity is breathing spirit into existence. That may sound strange. Exactly what spirit are we talking about? The ancient Greeks said it was the goddess spirit of the muse who delivered ideas like love letters to those open to receiving. Religious people might consider God to be the source of creative insight. Others might point to spirit guides, the higher self, ancestors, or even interdimensional beings. According to Carl Jung, there is a collective unconscious where all thoughts and ideas are waiting to be discovered. Personally, I believe these are all metaphors for the same thing, our own intuition. According to Hinduism, there is a spiritual world, Brahman, and a material world, Maya. Brahman is considered the true reality, an invisible dimension of pure energy, the fertile subconscious from which matter is born. The material world is called Maya, which is the temporary illusion of 3D reality, a shadow cast by the higher light of Brahman. Humans exist between these worlds. The body exists in Maya, but the soul's home is Brahman. Intuition is the bridge between. When we tune into our own inner voice, we connect with the frequency of Brahman, of source creation. You can call the muse spirit whatever you like, or don't call it anything at all. The point isn't to give the muse a label. The point is to learn her language. So, with that, I am going to invite Lalah onto the stage. For those who aren't familiar with Lalah, she is a best-selling author, an educator, a spiritual writer, a certified spiritual practitioner, and the founder of Vibrate Higher Daily School. So, Lalah, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, James. Wow, what a beautiful passage, like to open us up for the day. Like I feel the muse is here. So does everyone feel that? Like the muse is here and it's just really palpable. So thank you for that invocation. Congratulations on the book. I'm so grateful to have written the forward for it.
Thank you so much. I'm also grateful for you to write the forward to it and just bless the book with your energy and your presence. So I just want to start by asking you, what are your thoughts on the muse, on inspiration? Where do you believe ideas come from? And then also, do you have any rituals like when it comes to writing? When it comes to writing and writing books and writing social media content, do you have any rituals that you evoke to really to summon that muse and to inspire your own creative process?
I do, absolutely. And the muse is something I definitely work with. It is the way I see it is we are conduits and the muse, this creative energy is a surge that will move through us, allowing us to be a greater conduit. The key. It was like I paused for a second because it was like, say this, see how I'm doing in real time? Like this is how I connect with it. It is a very like if you were not a creative, you would think maybe some moments I'm like, okay, she's having a moment, that kind of thing. Like you kind of have to be a little like off the beaten path to be a creative. And you have to not care about what people think and what you have to do to be the conduit and to allow the surge to come through. So I absolutely have rituals, and I do believe that that is a real thing. And all of it is sourced from me, from the most high creator. Like that's where I see everything from. It will channel through like branches, however it sees fit to get to you, to get to us, each individual who is supposed to take that surge and do with it what the muse wills it to do. And as far as rituals, there's so many. I literally feel like I live in ritual. So it would be
Mm.
easier to ask me like, what is not a ritual in your in your life?
Well,
Uh,
let's start with this. Where do you is there a certain time of day that you tend to do your writing?
Oh gosh, yeah. And this is my funnest thing to do actually is to do the intuitive writing or and I call them these streams of divine insight, divine creativity that come through. And that usually happens in the God hours, which are usually between 4 and 6 a.m. So for instance, James, Vibrant Higher Daily was written in the God hours, I call them. I didn't coin that, but that's what a lot of creatives call it because of that. The muse is so present during those hours.
Do you force yourself to get up in order to write at that early stage, or does that come naturally to you?
It's definitely natural now. Even days when I don't write, I'm still up at that hour. Now, there are many times in between, like before that time, where I'm like jolted out of my sleep with a creative idea. And
Mm.
I write it down, I get it down some type of way. That happens quite often. Like if I'm working on a big project, and this year, I would say 2023, and then this year so far, I have been getting huge visitations from the Muse, and I'm just so excited. And I see myself really being put on a path of expansion in my own creativity, which requires a lot more courage, a lot more visibility. And the Muse is here, and I'm just listening to the directions. And yeah, it's definitely during those hours mostly. And then I know on your podcast, I talked about how all throughout the day, I am listening to the muse, which will speak through television, radio, songs, labels, ingredient packages, y'all. Like whatever, just marketing, like anything. So even if it's just like one word that sparks like a whole writing me writing for a whole week off of one word, a theme. Yeah.
Mm. So, is there anything else you do other than, sit down to write? Is there anything else you do just to kind of prepare yourself to receive inspiration from the muse, like whether that's music you're playing or something you're drinking or any type of prayers you're offering, or how does that, like, how do you get yourself in that space to prepare your own consciousness for the muse?
Yeah. So there's two parts that I definitely am excited to share here is that when I have writing blocks, I listen to the sound of water. The sound of flowing water has been the greatest gift. It's just that energy of flow is so good for like bringing things, making you fluid, your thoughts fluid. And same way we would sit in stillness when we want to be still, the sound of flow really helps us flow, opens channels, the floodgate. And the other thing, and this takes time, it is something I've cultivated over time. But again, and this is something where Zen Buddhist master monk teacher Thich Nhat Hanh had shared years ago, and I never forgot it, that the whole day is meditation. Like, when you know how to meditate, like the whole day is meditation. And I took that on as a path for me. So I started making cooking a meditation, how I speak to people a meditation. And second part to that is that growing up in my cultural spiritual background, I saw my grandmothers and my father and my mother, like they were just always in spiritual community. Like, no, if they were at the grocery store, if they were, in a church, my father and, wherever he was with his Buddhism, my mother with her Christianity, my grandmothers with their Christianity in the neighborhood, like they just brought the church to them where they are. It wasn't just a Sunday thing. Or my father, it wasn't just when he was in the Sangha or a temple. And I remember for me, like that made such an impression. And so the way that reflects in my life, those seeds that were planted in me, plus what Thich Nhat Hanh shared, is that the whole day for me, I'm just open. Like I just stay open. So I do things as far as like the rituals that you asked about, like drinking cacao, making sure I take certain tinctures every day, like adaptogens, ashwagandha, because you never know when the muse is going to show up. So I'm like, if you get ready, you don't have to stay. Wait, no, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, that kind of thing.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. And so like I just make sure throughout the day, like my life is literally built around being a vessel and conduit for that surge to come through whenever it wants to.
That's so beautiful. I love that. When you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that idea. Do you have any ideas, like we're talking about the muse? Is that a term that you use in your life, or do you associate that with any particular other spiritual framework? Like is the muse to you, is that just God? Is that your higher self? Is that, or do you just let it be a mystery and just flow with it without even trying to put a label on it?
Yeah, I do some of all. I definitely I don't really use the word muse,
Yeah.
but I know it's a muse. You know what I mean? So to hear you call it a muse, I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I'm aware of that's what it is, and I don't label it usually. I the one thing I'm aware of though is that the source it's originating from when I feel like it's something that is very divine. Like this is a hot, so with my work, vibration, energy, all that this is a high vibrational channel coming through. And sometimes the muse is like, the muse can be hardcore on another spectrum. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to put this out into the world, but it did need to express itself through me. And I have a lot. And so those kind of things land in my journals or they never see the light of day, but they still have to come through as I'm sure like all the creators on this call and yourself so included that 90% of my work is never seen, 90% of it is never seen. And it doesn't mean it's something negative, but it was something that made sense for something I don't have to explain to anyone. It just had to be put out. And I think that's the majority, I think, of the creative process is making like, work that maybe look crappy, unfinished, unpolished. But that's putting you in the creative space. And that's what we're called to do. And I think that that's such a beautiful place to, if I could even dare to use this word, is in the creative process, is to be obedient, to that not having to be perfect or looking for perfection when we're creating, or don't look at this has to get put out. But when you do that, the more and more you're able to create things that will eventually be able to be put out. Kind of low quality art is important.
I love that. Like that reminds me of so many things. Like it reminds me of, and I also, I love what you said about listening to running water
Mm.
because that is literally flow. It's like you're training your own mind to flow and to that effortless flow. And it's like I think about water or like a spring. It's like most water that flows is never it's never drank, right? But it's
Right.
gotta flow. It's gotta always flow in order for some of it to be drank. You know, it's gotta be. So I feel like the creative process, it's like some of it, there's so much that is trying to move through us, especially when we have that vessel open. It's like just letting it move through you.
Yes.
It's like if you filter that out, or if you censor the stuff that isn't great, you'll never get to the great stuff because you're blocking the channel.
Right.
So it's like letting it flow, 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 even if it's not good. Just do a, it's like a just doing like a dump. Like I associate creativity sometimes with a purge, where I'm just it's like I like to go in the sauna and get a good sweat. And it's like when I write something, when I'm creating, I often feel it's similar. I'm sweating something out. It's like it's trying to get out of me. And I do my best just to listen and almost take dictation from the muse, where it's like I don't even know where this is going, but I'm just going to follow exactly word for word where it takes me. And it's just like trusting that flow, trusting that flow. And you're right, it's not all going to be amazing work, but when you trust that flow and let it move through you, there's a higher likelihood that at some point you're going to create great work.
Right. Yeah, that is so important because we're not called to be creatives just so we can post on Instagram. Like that is not the end all be all of our creativity. And if the world shifted tomorrow, our creativity would adapt. And what would it be then? Right. And it has adapted from the time we realized we had some type of gift.
Hmm.
It has been served for wherever we were called to at that time. Nowadays, it is social media. So that's the place where we're able to share our work the most. But it's so important, or YouTube or TikTok, wherever that is. But it's so important not to just stop there, like you say, and it's allowing that flow to come through. And when you were saying that, I saw literally that's how like I experienced it too. And it's just like this water just surging through. And you made such a perfect analogy that not all water is captured, but it's like when you think about rivers going downstream, half of that water, I mean, I would say 90% probably is never captured. And the rest of it, though, has a purpose. It's flowing into its divine order to get back to the ocean, which is like the bigger picture. And I think that just is something to be said about that with
Yeah,
creativity.
absolutely. I love this question in the chat. How do you choose what to put out? If you're always downloading ideas and doing, just mind dumps onto the page. How do you choose what to put out? Do you have a specific intention for the work you publish? And then do you like measure up all the work, just by your intention to see what sticks, or how do you decide what to put out?
It's a feeling. It's a feeling of this needs to be released. So where other pieces are, this is not supposed to be released. And there sometimes is a level of fear around releasing a thing that lets me know this is what needs to be released, right? And again, it's like trying to hold the water back and the water is ready to surge forth. Like we can't do that because if not, it's like it's almost like this what I've experienced over long periods of not releasing things that had to be released, it almost like implodes. So it will release, but it may release within us that comes in form of a cold or an achy back or oh my goodness, like so it can get really serious. And so, for instance, I heard Robert Greene say once that when he was hesitating to write, what was the new book about humankind or human something?
I don't know the name, but I know he has a new book. Yeah.
That one. He said that the book almost killed him because he couldn't write like he usually did and needed to because he was sick. And the fact that that wasn't happening, which usually is like a healing mechanism for him, made his illness even worse. And so he was like, in order to heal, I have to go write, but I have to get the strength to write. And so that is just so true with the creative process because creativity, it's flow again. So you can flow out of like a mindset, a shift, a mood, anything. So I definitely think that it's a feeling of flow, like this is ready to flow into a greater space. It can also be a theme, like a theme that matches. And this is the thing too, like intuitive, like the muse has a purpose to show up with your work being medicine. I truly believe that. And so, for instance, in a time like now, the earth needs a lot of reassurance, love, unity, harmony. And so when I know that something speaks to that right now, I do that. Now, if something is going to be so completely off that or opposing that, that's not my job to put that out. It may be someone else's, but
Yeah.
so I put that against my moral compass and my spiritual and creative integrity of honoring how the muse uniquely wants to speak through me.
Yeah, it's interesting how, writing for social media is such a new thing in the human experience. Like this is a new thing, and we're communicating to people at scale instantaneously, every day. And it's such a new territory for writers to explore. And what I find myself doing, because we're more than ever before, we're having these collective experiences. If something's happening in the world, it affects us all because we all see it, we're all exposed to it.
Mm.
So in my own work, when I'm writing for social media, I often feel like I'm channeling, like we're talking about channeling the muse, but I think in a lot of cases, what I feel like I'm doing is I'm channeling the collective energy. It's like it's like I'm tuning into an energy field, and I'm like, what is the message that is needed at this time?
Yes.
So and it's like, that way, that's how you can provide value and be of service, is like addressing how people are feeling in the moment.
That is so 100% true. And for us, like you said, this new way of writing, this is what the word I truly believe that creativity was the revolution of our time. We had Tumblr, it was, I think MySpace kicking it off and then Tumblr and and I remember I was a MySpace kid, I was a Tumblr kid, and now moving on to these more modern formats and spaces, that's exactly what it was because MySpace was like a way we all felt like we were like web designers. We could, put up a website that, colors and we were code, like, we were
You can
coding and
embed a song into your profile.
oh, that I'm so mad that that does not exist anymore. I need the song. I need to be able to embed songs. Yeah, remember that Tumblr. Tumblr took that idea for a minute, but then they got rid of it, I guess, because of rights or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, like we've always found a way to create for the time. And I believe that now what I'm witnessing is social media in the format it is, seems like the most lasting form of social media that we've experienced. And that has something to say with learning how to see people's creativity in their life, whether it is literally like, how do you cook? Like watching someone cook every day, that's creativity. Watching how someone parents, watching someone sit in front of their, computer and just talk and feel real. Like all of this is different forms of creativity that we never knew existed and we were never exposed to because it wasn't label, like they didn't have a label for it before. And this is things that I feel would normally be called not creativity or low quality art. And low quality art is literally, I think, what is moving TikTok. You know what I mean? Like what really is the undercurrent of TikTok. It's just raw. It's so unformatted. At least most of it. I think now that's become a format to look unformatted. But yeah, we're just in such creative times where it's just like this is the creative revolution.
Yeah. And it's great because if for me, it's a direct transmission from, from muse to creator to consumer, right?
Yep.
Because it's so quick. So it's
Yep.
like, yeah, you don't. you don't have to be super polished because it's just more about that direct transmission and just getting
Yeah.
the energy across, and it doesn't have to be super fancy. But I want to, I feel like your voice on social media, I mean, your book as well, but the voice your creative voice is very, it's very defined. It's very powerful and calming, and I would say stable and inspirational. The higher vibration that you speak to, it really comes across in your work. So I'm curious on just your own personal journey in finding your own creative voice. I mean, I know you said earlier that you grew up in a house that was quite spiritual. I think you said your father was a Buddhist and your mother was Christian. So you grew up with a solid spiritual foundation. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh wow. It was a mixture of just deep, deep spirit. And when I say spiritual background, like we would have the Sangha some days at our house, or in Buddhism, or with my grandmothers, they were like tagging me along to church and tagging me along. So one of my grandmothers in particular, she was she was just such a benevolent woman. Like she would go literally on her street, make meals for what they call the sick and shut in, or single mothers. Like when she would cook dinner for us, she would cook dinner for them. And so, we would have this cousin, that cousin, run up the street and give Miss Pamela this plate, take her these 3 plates. So the children run in each direction, different directions with plates. And so this is what I grew up seeing. And for me, that was just so powerful and of a spiritual foundation. So I grew up grounded around, and mind you, we all went to my grandmother's house after school, and then all of our parents would pick us up, and then we would disperse home after that, and then go have dinner. I think it's called dinner or supper. They used to tell me like one is dinner, one is supper. Someone in the chat can let us know. But so we would have supper and dinner. So it was really interesting, and then in the church and just in my community growing up as well. Like I just was used to community, stable forces and energies. And there was a long time when I didn't know who I was in the world. And I didn't have this, whatever this is that you see that the world receives, I didn't have this for a while. I lost it on my own, soul searching journey and some trauma and this and that, the dark night of the soul, the hero's journey, but I had to go get it. And this, what you see now in the writing, is the reflection of me choosing to surrender all of the things, the past that I thought that I was, the paths that I thought I was meant to take or that I wanted to take because it looked like that was the thing to do, and just surrender to. And the first thing I had to surrender to was write, just start writing. And I gave writing up in high school. I won a national poetry contest in high school, but after high school, never wrote again. And so it was really like this like shooting star, like once in a million years you see, because before that, I'd never released my poetry. A teacher saw some of my writing. She was like, you absolutely have to enter this contest. And I did, and I won nationally. And it was really weird because I wasn't like part of the writers club at all. And then I gave that up and had a life of, just kind of steered me every which way. And then on my healing journey is when it came back to me. And now this is what I do in the world to help other people heal and feel stable in their life. So I do feel like our creativity in some sort of way is our own path of redemption, our path of coming home to who we truly are, and our path of stability. If
Absolutely.
yeah, if we don't put labels or try to say this is what the outcome needs to be, right? Like it needs to be this with this gift. If we just stay, with an open heart, a brave heart, open mind with it.
Absolutely. Who are some of the writers? I really love the idea of creative lineage. We
Mhm.
people talk about, ancestors and being part of a, there's different spiritual lineages, of course. I'm a big believer in this in spiritual lineage.
Yeah.
And you know, and what that means is like I just think that, we all are inspired by people when we're young or even when we're old, and we pick up techniques or inspiration from different people, and whether they be poets or, speakers or teachers or novelists or musicians. And I'm wondering, who are some of your formative creative influences, either as a a young woman or a teenager or even as an adult, you know, who are some of the go-to teachers that really aligned you on your own creative path?
Oh wow, when I was younger, hands down was Langston Hughes. His writings floored me when I first discovered him. And a lot of the pain that I felt with like some things that were happening as a child that I couldn't express to anyone in my family, he spoke to all of that. Maya Angelou, Why the Cage Bird Sings. And it was a full circle moment. I have a video on TikTok when my book was placed in Target. And when I go get to Target, it's placed exactly next to that book. Why the
Mm.
Sing. Like the muse, it's like things like that. It's just like a reassurance on our path. And then I think getting more into my journey. Oh, also when I was younger, I want to say the Bible, in particular, the Bible, Romans, Psalms, and Proverbs in the Bible
Yeah.
so beautiful. I wasn't connecting so much of like, oh, I'm reading a spiritual book. I was so enthralled. And I had to be my grandmother, Layla, I'm named after two grandmothers, Layla and Delia. She only had a third
Mm.
grade education and she did not read beyond a third grade education. This is a Black woman. And I was her Bible reader in her Bible group. So this young girl is reading in front of all these elder church mothers, and I'm falling in love with the writing. And so I would even say that was my first inkling that writing is medicine because I started going from just being the reader to eventually like, no, I have to sit with this book and just read because it does something to me when I'm reading these passages. The same thing happened though when I read the Quran. I've read the Quran before, beautiful. I've read Hindu books. Like I just really discovered a lot of books. And one book in particular, a spiritual book from Howard Thurman is, oh gosh, I have it like right over there on my bookshelf. I can't see it. So many of his books. The Journey Inward. The Journey Inward is probably like my
Mm.
favorite book. And Howard Thurman, and he's known to be like the father of the civil rights movement. It's where Martin Luther King got his whole like nonviolent approach, calm approach, which is from Thich Nhat Hanh, like right here. So it's kind of and Gandhi. So it's kind of like a lineage. Rumi, I would say for sure. Tagore. So this is moving into sacred poetry.
Yeah.
Tagore, which they talk a lot about the muse, Tagore, and then a very rare poet from the same time as Rumi. Her name is Rabia. Are you familiar with her?
Actually, no, but I love Rumi, so I'm very interested.
Yeah, it is so hard to find her work, but if you can find it, she's divine. And then I would just say a lot of the saints, like writings from the saints, have always just inspired me because of how they lived, their devotion, and one John of the Cross for sure, and then Saint Teresa of Avila. And if I could just read something really quickly, if we
Please.
have time from her,
Yeah.
I keep it on my phone and I was actually working with it. I was putting it on my website just yesterday. So if I could find this.
Yeah, while you're looking for that, I'm just going to say that I think it's so I love all these references and I really I really love the idea of for any artist and any writer, it's great to be inspired by, current writers or writers from the 20th century, but I found a lot of value in what I call these foundational texts, these texts that are, 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old, because there's something stable about something that has survived and, you know, generation after generation continues to inspire. So, yeah, I grew up with the Bible as well, and Psalms and Proverbs definitely were my favorites because they really are sacred poetry. And lately, I've been really into more Eastern religion and philosophy. So like the Tao Te Ching is really probably my favorite book ever. And then you mentioned Rumi, and for me it's also Hafez is the other Persian poet. So
Okay.
I read Hafez and the Tao Te Ching every morning. So just I really recommend for anyone finding a foundational text that you resonate with and just going back to it like a just as a just as a stabilizer for your own creative and spiritual practice.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. And I found it.
Yeah.
Okay. It reads, God. So this is from Saint Teresa of Avila, and she was a Carmelite nun from Spain. And she is who Mother Teresa named herself after and always quote, and this is how I discovered her through Mother Teresa. Christ has no body. So Christ, God, I'm going to go ahead and put God here, just so it's universal. God has no body now but yours. No hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes through which God looks with compassion on the world. Yours are the feet with which God walks to do good. Yours are the hands through which God blesses all the world. Yours are the hands, yours are the feet, yours are the eyes, you are the body. God has no body on earth now but yours.
Facts.
Facts, right?
I
So
love it.
it,
I've never heard that expressed in that way, but I love that sentiment. God has no body but yours. And that is what we're talking about is like allowing ourselves to be vessels and, to anchor heaven on earth, right? Because it's up to us to do that. It's like what people say like where is God? But God lives through us and God exists as much as we allow that spirit to exist through us.
that's it, period. And that's the creativity. Like, and that's to me, like that could easily be called, the poem of the muse. The muse has no hands on earth but just yeah, so perfect. Yeah.
Absolutely. That reminds me, I'm going to read. This is actually a little poem at the very end of the book. So I'm going to read this to kind of close us out and then we'll open the floor to any questions.
Perfect.
To create, to bring any vision to life is a spiritual activity. God exists without form in the breath of the saxophone player, the movement of the painter's brush, the instinct of the freestyle rapper, and the motion of a dancing body. To be inspired is to be in spirit. There is no church on earth more holy than the human body, a vessel that grounds heaven here and now.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That literally would be her next, if that was like back then, that's like the next page on the
Real,
book.
I picked up where she left off.
I picked up right where she left off.
um,
Wow.
Wow, so this was so fun to get a chance to chat with you. I know we message on Instagram a lot. It's always fun to sit down and drop in with you. And I just want to see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom, and we will take some time to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Yeah. While we're doing that, I just want to say thank you if anyone's typing. Thank you so much for having me. And this is such a great way to gather around your book and to celebrate your writing and your output as the muse has moved through you. I'm so, so, so proud of you.
Thank you so much. So happy for you to have been a part of it. Hold on a second. There's a question in the chat. So I'll ask this for you, Layla. How does the muse feel in your body? Is it the same always?
Yeah. The muse, no, it's not the same always. So sometimes it feels like a warm assurance. Sometimes it feels like a storm. And sometimes it feels something that you want to resist, that you don't want to say yes to. And I feel that it's so important to, again, have an open mind, an open heart, a brave heart with the muse, because it takes courage to be a good conduit of the muse, a good vessel of the muse, to say yes when you don't want and then to understand that ultimately it's a bigger picture. The creativity is part of a bigger picture. Like this is a message that has to be put out. This is a piece of art that has to be put out. And I think that it helps to just like Ram Dass said, we're all walking each other home. And that's what art is. That's what creativity is. It's helping us to walk each other home. And there's codes, light codes, and just sacred codes embedded in art that people receive that we can't even name and explain, but they have to get out there.
Yes, and I'll add to that. Like I think the answer is sort of in the question as well, because the
Mhm.
question is how does the muse feel in the body? And I just think that's the key point is that for me the muse does speak through the body more so than the mind. So for me it's like the mind is just like a computer hard drive that calculates things, right? I don't think that the conscious ego mind is what the muse speaks to.
Yeah.
Right. The muse speaks, it's so subtle. It's like it's such a like the ego speaks loud and it's like a barking dog or like an alarm going off and it's like burp burp burp. The muse is it's a quiet whisper. So you really have to be attuned to that voice, which for me is about dropping into the body and being sensitive to your own energy and emotions and sitting with them long enough until the voice is clear. And that's been a long journey for me to get to that point. My natural disposition is to be in my head and to think about things and to solve things and to figure things out. But when and there is a role, like if you're in creativity, to like as you're making things, use the mind. But when you're receiving that inspiration from the muse, for me it's about dropping into the body and feeling rather than thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a body consciousness. Yeah, and a body experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Carlin's got a question in the chat. Do you see the muse as a spirit or God or as your higher self or all the same thing? I'll just answer this from my perspective is I think it's I I think that I like to honor the mystery of it because it's like I see that how this works, but there's one of my I mentioned the Tao Te Ching on my favorite book. And one of the first lines in the book is the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. And what
Mhm.
this means, the Tao is another word for almost for God. So it's like the God that can be named is not the true God. Meaning, as
Mhm.
soon as you label something, you put it in a box.
Right.
And the truth is, you can't put it in a box. So, you could call it the higher self. Certainly, I think that's valid. You could call it God. You could call it just intuition. But I think that as soon as you label it too strictly, then it's like it becomes rigid because then you say God, and then it implies some other being, right? Or if you say your higher self, then it becomes, it's maybe part of you, and it's kind of both, but neither. So for me, it's so important to not label it, but just to honor it, and just like, for me in my own journey as a creative journey, spiritual journey, learning to be comfortable with contradiction and with not knowing with certainty, but still just like, not putting labels and boxes around it, but letting the mystery be the mystery. Do
Oh,
you agree
yeah.
with that, Layla?
Yeah, I do. I do. And the reason or the way I agree is like sometimes, so for me, my spiritual background and, the ceremonial and ritual type of life I live and lead. Sometimes I'm clear that a message is coming from an ancestor. Maybe it's my mother on the other side communicating. Maybe it's one of my children in my home. Like I'm intuiting something from them. Like we're picking up things all day long. We're even picking up things. I think you spoke to this. We're even picking up things from the collective conscious. So we just have to be open to where it's coming from and just be the conduit, the satellite, the radio tower for it. And if it's something that you pick up, so and this is another thing I wrote before that applies now is observe without absorbing. If this is
Mm.
something that you feel is not mine to take and to create with, but I will observe the channel, I will observe the creativity, the muse, but I don't necessarily have to do anything with it. And I think that's where, when you start to get into maturity with your art and just how you move, it's such a piece that you're like, I don't have to create on everything that comes through because that can be a thing too. And it's very, just that come with its own type of taxing and wearing of the body, mind, and even of the gift.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, just because I've, yeah, I get a lot of ideas, and you can't, it's so important as an artist to know your voice again, like to know what your role, what your unique role and purpose is, and what you show up to do, and your, it's like social media is like one big conversation that the world is having. And it's
Yeah.
like, what is your voice and role in that conversation? And the more purpose and intention you have with your own voice, the more clarity of purpose you're going to bring. And that means saying no to certain ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that myself. It's like, because I'm sure a lot of you follow me on social media, and I do a lot of some memes and some poems, and I'm throwing a lot of stuff at the wall, and like that's fun for me. But I'm also right now in the process of refinement, where it's like, being more, maybe even if it means posting less, but showing up with more clarity and intention behind my work. So I'm serving a specific purpose, not just throwing out every idea that comes to mind.
Yes. Yeah, that is so important. There's my friend and I, we made each other laugh one time when we found ourselves like showing up for every cause. And we were just like, okay, this is not feeling good in my body. Like it was like cause after cause after cause after cause. And so we were just saying at one point, we're like, okay, we're just going to hold the refreshment table down. Like we're not going to be on the front lines for this one. Like I'll be, supporting you. You need a drink, you need a snack. Like I got you over here. So metaphorically, and that's just like we can support causes as creatives sometimes by holding space in a different light, like maybe just amplifying, right? Maybe just holding space with our own community. Maybe we're holding space offline. Maybe we're not showing up for every single cause because it can turn performative, as we know, and that just doesn't feel good. And again, like you said, like what is my divine role in this? What is my voice? And then speaking of my voice, what would I say to something like this? If I don't have anything to say, let me just listen until something comes in, but I don't have to move to say something. And then there's something I wrote that says, if it's not in divine alignment, I don't want it. If it's not in divine alignment, I don't want it. So whether that is like a call to do something, the collective ego making me feel like I have to show up and or respond to this. It's almost like a trend, like TikTok trends, like everybody jumps on it. But the true creator's path really calls you to look at that, non-judgment, but that's not what the creative path is. It's not trends. It's just really listening and allowing. Yeah.
A-
And then
abs-
feeling divinely yours.
Absolutely. We have one more question in the chat. Do you think it's possible to listen to slash receive the muse when you are feeling anxious? What do you think about this one, Layla?
Yeah, I think that anxiousness and fear and doubt and low self-worth can block the muse because it's us putting those. I've even said that we can make those an idol, and the muse doesn't like that. The muse likes to just come into a free mind. We have to, in the words of Bob Marley, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. And that has been a mantra of mine because there's so much that wants to come through your free mind, your free spirit, your openness. And when we are in anxiousness, though, we do have a way to get out of that, to balance back. And that's getting in nature, grounding, being somewhere where you can release that energy so that it doesn't cause static in creativity. And those days come, for the best of us. But it's just a matter of switching modes, getting away from creative mode and getting into restoring and healing mode. That's so important to have that balance as a creative because sometimes we don't know how to turn it off. Or sometimes it doesn't know how to let us go.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I think that, you know, having a sense of inner peace and, a calm nervous system, you're gonna be a more reliable channel for like, let's just say, divine inspiration, for sure. So yeah, part of my morning practice when I'm writing is just to make sure my body feels good. Just make sure I feel relaxed, that I feel tuned in. And if I'm not, maybe I should, read some poetry or like listen to some calming music before I try to write, just so I'm in the right state of mind. So I will say that. But at the same time, I'll offer a counterpoint that I think that, and I write about this in the book, where I think that art exists across the full emotional spectrum. So like we're talking about right now, we're talking about kind of like sacred poetry and writing and things like that, which is kind of our our forte. But
Right,
you
right.
think about, so a lot of art is made from pain,
Yeah.
or made from rage. I think of like things like punk rock music, or you know, I think that art can be made with any emotion. So
Yeah.
it might affect the output, but like I make a comparison in my book actually to two painters.
Yeah.
And the point is that you can work with whatever you have, because let's compare two painters. One is Georgia O'Keeffe. Okay. Georgia O'Keeffe she makes these beautiful landscapes because she lived in New Mexico, and
Yeah.
she had a really quiet life, and she painted these beautiful scenes of flowers and desert landscapes, and it's all very peaceful and beautiful, right? Because that was her life.
Yeah.
But then another artist that I really like is the painter Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Mm,
Okay. They
mm,
couldn't have been more different. Like Basquiat lived in New
totally.
York City. He was poor before he became rich, but he was poor and, a drug addict, and lived in New York. And his art is so sloppy, and it's so messy, and it's so chaotic, because that was the world around him, and that's what he was living in. So
Mm,
he was able to work with what he had and channel that into his art. And I love Basquiat, and who's a better artist, John Michel Basquiat or Georgia O'Keeffe? They're very different, very different. I wouldn't say one is better than the other. It's just different mood and energy. So I think you can create art when you're anxious, but it's going to be imbued with that anxiousness. So if you
yeah.
can take that and use it, and bend it and turn it into something that is impactful and provocative, then certainly you can do that. It really depends on what you want to communicate with your work.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, that's a valid point, and thank you. Is it Marina? Thank you, Marina, for bringing that balance into the conversation and for writing it into the book, James. I do agree with that. And there's been times when I write out of pain and out of remembrance of pain. And there's times when I'm blocked by it. And I think that it is important to give it an outlet. And the way I experience it is sometimes even it's because I've healed in certain areas that I'm able to write about something that was painful at a time. Like it may not show up yet. It just may be really jumbly. That's the way I experience it. But once I've healed, or if I'm not in that anxious state anymore, I'm able to find the art in it. I'm able to find the gift that showed up in it. And then there's other times when the art has to come through very fast and rigid and not and unpretty and it's just like put it out. And it's just like, and sometimes that's what we see sometimes, like I would say can be viral moments, of when something was just so not planned. It was just straight from the heart. It was unpretty. I didn't want to do it, but I did. And something pulled me and viral moment. So it definitely, we have to put some respect on it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So I want to thank everyone for joining today. The book's going to be out in I don't know, less than 3 weeks now. So you're all going to get a copy. So I hope you all really enjoy it. And I hope you guys come back for some more of these artist talks that we're going to be doing over the next couple months. And Layla, thank you again so much. I really appreciate your support around the book and your friendship and just the vibrations that you bring into the world. So thank you so much for being a part of it, and for being here today to share your wisdom with us. Really
Mm,
appreciate it.
thank you. Thank you for having me. And everyone, you're going to enjoy the book so
Yeah.
much. Thank
And
you,
I'm
James.
going to end us with a little exercise that you can do in your own time that's related to this. So, this is called making an artist altar. Okay. Because I think that I like to fill my room with artifacts that inspire me, and, some altars are typically made with, creative relic or spiritual relics and things like that. But I like to infuse my office with creative influences as well, and artistic inspiration. So this is a little guidance on how to make your own artist altar. Making the room where you create a sacred space will help you get into the right mindset and summon the spirit of the muse. Choose an area to designate as your altar. It could be a shelf, a small table, or another surface area. Fill the space with artifacts that inspire you, such as crystals, statues, candles, pictures, or incense. Include a mix of spiritual and creative inspiration. For example, include photos, books, albums, or other souvenirs to represent your favorite artists. Artistic iconography can be just as powerful as spiritual iconography. Keep this space clean and organized, a symbol of your dedication to your craft.